Hi, I'm Benj. Welcome back to Doing Outdoors. Now, if you cast your mind back about 4 weeks to my last video, I was just taking 2 piglets off to slaughter. Well, those piglets came back the Thursday after they went on a Tuesday, and I've got a little bit of a video showing the results of those carcasses. And what I've got here on the table are almost 2 halves of the 2 different pigs that went away, and I just wanted to show you the side-by-side comparison. When they were weighed at the abattoir, their death weight was 65 kilos for Barrel and 62 kilos for Bacon's piglet, Barrel being Bertha's offspring. Barrel was 3 weeks older than the other guy. He didn't have a name, but there are some quite big differences, and it's mainly the fat coverage. So this carcass is off of Barrel, and this is just where I've taken the front end off, the shoulder and the head, but it gives you a good view on this cross section of the back fat. Compare that with Bacon's piglet. It's considerably smaller, this amount of fat, a lot less fat covering. So even though it was 2 kilos lighter as a whole carcass, I think there's more than 2 kilos of extra fat on Barrel. It's really noticeable as you get down towards the back leg and the hip compared to Bacon's. This was 3 weeks younger, so I think it's safe to say that we're getting the better carcasses out of Bacon. So that confirms what I was going to do anyway, and that's get rid of Bertha and probably bring some new breeding stock onto the farm, and hopefully try and get some heavier carcasses still in the same amount of time. Barrel was just over 7 months, and this other guy was just under 7 months, and at 63 and 65 kilos isn't too bad, but I'd be happier if they were closer to 80. Well, those piglets have been fully butchered now. Some have been eaten, some are still in the freezer, and it's good quality meat, far better than anything you can get from the supermarket. But today's task is we've got to pay some attention to the no dig bed. Now, if you can remember even further back to a video that I posted last year, I started a no dig bed up the farm, and it consisted of 3 bays. Well, this year I managed to improve on that. I've put a 4th bay in, which is twice the size as the other bays. The first bays I installed were 750mm wide with a 300mm path, and to be fair, it's a little bit too narrow. So the next beds and any subsequent beds that I put in after, they're going to be 1200mm wide, and there'll be a 400mm path between. And this bed was built solely using homemade compost that was made from the grass cuttings, the animal manure and the wood chip, all off this land. And you can see the runner beans behind me looking really good. Now, they are actually from some home saved seed from the crop that I grew last year at home. We've also got down here some dwarf French beans, again grown from home saved seed. There's 2 varieties, there's Belotti and Contender, I think they are, both doing really well. Then we've got some multi-sown leeks and some carrots, and I think you'll agree they're all performing really well in this homemade compost. And they were produced, or the compost was produced, you can't really see, the chickens are in the way, but in my compost bays, which are made up of the broken down pallets. We'll have a look a bit closer at those in a little while. But then we've got the 3 original bays. Now, it's hard to see or distinguish the bays from the paths at the minute because I keep getting squirrels, rabbits, mice, rats. They all want to come in here and have a scratch around, even the blackbirds. I've caught them trying to have a dust bath in the wood chip paths, and it just fires the wood chip everywhere. So it is not as neat as I'd like it, but we are growing some good veg. And the job in hand today is to get the onions out. You can see most of them have fell over. And this is the first year I've tried to grow onions in a multi-sown cell. Now this is following Charles Dowding's recommendations. Let's go and have a look at the results. So we have actually got two types of onion growing down in these beds. We've got some reds, which to be honest, have performed better than I expected. They're all grown from seed, started in modular cells, and I know we are towards the end of August now, right near the end, but I've left them as long as I possibly could to try and get them as big as possible, because the white onions were considerably smaller than the red. But these reds haven't done too bad at all. I'm happy with that. And they were grown 3 plants to a cell. And then we've got the white onions. These are Bedfordshire champions. And some have made a decent size, whilst others are rather on the small side. There are 1 or 2 examples where they've done well. Here's one. That's not a bad size onion. But on the whole, the white onions are pretty small. Now I don't know whether that's because the variety that I'm trying to grow don't like being grown so close together, or whether it was just the weather conditions. They were all sown at the same time, the reds and the whites. But I had very poor germination on the white seed. So a few weeks later I sowed another packet of white seeds, and then I pricked those individually to grow how I would normally grow onions. 1 plant per space, or 1 plant per cell. And they've not done too bad. They are actually 4 weeks younger than these onions that are in the multi-sown setting. So these are just a few of the onions that I planted individually. Again, they are 4 weeks younger than the multi-sown counterparts, and they've made a good size. Now this is the way I would normally grow onions. 1 plant every 6 inches and about 8 inches between the rows, and it always works well. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to try growing onions in the multi-sown setting, because the red onions have done really well. In fact, nearly all of them. Here's another bunch. And you've got to be happy with those. They've done really well. But these singly sown onions have also done well. So perhaps next year I'll do 50-50. I might do a bed of multi-sowns and a bed of single plant 6 inches apart, and see what does better. There's obviously a lot more work having to go into planting these out individually than the multi-sown, but we'll see how we get on. Well, just before I set to work getting all these onions out, let's go and have a little peep into one of my greenhouses. Now, I cut short last year just before harvest, but I actually did very well in the large greenhouse. The tomatoes did brilliantly. The chilies, the hot chilies, did very well. The sweet peppers didn't do the best, but this year things are also doing well. Just look at those beauties in there. Some monsters. So in here, on this side of the greenhouse, we are growing plum tomatoes. Now, I'm not a massive fan of eating tomatoes raw. I do still grow some smaller tomatoes, and we have some cherries on the other side, but primarily I want my tomatoes to go into the cooking. Sauces, spaghetti bolognese, chili con carne, all that kind of stuff. Any way you'd have tomato cooked, I really enjoy it. And this variety is called Super Mama. It's an F1 variety. And just look at the size of that. They have really performed well this year. We have had a couple of tomatoes off these already, but just look at these trusses with absolute massive tomatoes. They've done really well. And again, we're still growing in no dig. These greenhouses were topped with homemade compost. In fact, I've only bought 2 bags of compost this year, and that was primarily for propagating the seeds, and then if I had to move the transplants into bigger pots I would use the shop bought compost. And in fact I've still got half a bag of one of those 2 bags left. So hopefully moving forward we won't have to buy any compost in. We should be able to make everything we need off this farm. That's what I'm hoping. And then on this side we have the cherry tomatoes again. We've been picking off these regularly for the last couple of weeks now, and this is a variety called Sweet Million, a variety that I grew years ago when I first had an allotment almost 20 years ago, and these are performing really well too. And then we've got the small greenhouse behind me, not doing as well as in here. I wanted that to be the chili and sweet pepper greenhouse, which it is. But I had a massive problem with slugs at the beginning of the year because it was so wet for such a long period. The slugs up here were immense, and they kept on sneaking into the greenhouse and eating the plants, sometimes in their entirety, other times just really knocking them back. So they've struggled, but we are getting a crop. We've got some plants with some bell peppers growing, which we didn't get last year at all. And we've got quite a few chilies growing, so it's not a total loss. So all in all, the growing season's been quite productive, and I still hope to get more greenhouses up here. And in fact I've had one laying on the ground all year. I've just not had the time to get it erected. I've got another 2 in a garden that I've got permission to take, so hopefully this winter the weather conditions will allow, and my other commitments will allow me to get some more greenhouses in place up here, so we can grow loads more tomatoes, loads more chilies. And the cows have just come up for a feed. They're still eating tons of hay. They're not doing bad though. Here's little Cass boy. He was the first calf that was born on the farm back on the 6th of October last year, so he's coming up for a year. Unfortunately his mother is quite short. There's 2 types of Dexters, a long leg and a short leg. His mother isn't mega short, but she is short. Well, he's come out really quite small. Considering this calf next to him is 7 months younger than him, and he's already standing almost a foot taller. But before we clear off, we'll go and have a look at how the compost is doing. I have been making compost this year, not to the scale that I was making my compost last year. I had quite a bit more time on my hands, so making videos, making compost, I had a lot more time for. But I've managed to make a bit, and here we are. I'm still running just on 4 pallet bays, and in fact these first 2 are still full of compost from what I made last year. And hopefully come winter I'll be able to put at least 2 more beds in, maybe 3 at 1200mm wide. Those beds that I'm growing in the minute are 4 meters long, so if I can get another 2 beds 1200 wide by 4 meters, that's almost going to double the growing space that I've got already. And then we've got another 2 bays that I've been filling this year. This was the first one I filled in spring. This one I am still working on, but I'm hoping that over the next month or 2, I'm going to have a little bit more time. I'll be able to turn a couple of these compost bays into each other, give me another 3 bay. I'll fill this one, fill another one, do a bit of turning, might even make a new bed. Because I really think this no dig growing method is the way forward. It's easy, the results are great, you just need a lot of compost. Now around me I've got more than enough material. It's just finding the time to get it put together, turned into compost. That's the only thing I'm struggling with. Well, I'm gonna get all these onions out the ground, and then I'm gonna get them onto a pallet into the tin shed so they can't get rained on, so they can dry out for a couple of weeks. There's a few onions there. I don't know whether there's quite enough to see us through for the year, because a lot of those white ones are small, but in future I'm going to plant at least double that amount. Well, I'm going to crack on. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Look at this absolute plonker.
Mate, I've got the loafers.
Got a pair of loafers on. What's the
Got the little gloves.
what's the mitts?
The little mittens.
They look toasty.
They are.
And you're going to feed them to my pigs?
No. These are my shoes.
Taking them home?